Hey everyone, welcome to Daily Revelations. Some quick insight today. We're finishing up the book of Ruth. We're going to dive into 1st and 2nd Samuel in the next couple days, but while we're in Ruth, I really want to talk about redemption. This is Easter weekend, and we hear a lot about our Redeemer and the cross and the redemption, but God set up this story and his desire to redeem his people way before we even heard about the cross, way back in the traditions that were part of what he set up through the Mosaic covenant. And the rules that he had the people follow when they had gone into the promised land. He said, okay, now you're going to divide this land up among the tribes, and then every family within that tribe will have a certain section of land. And that certain section of land would never leave that family, no matter how poor they became. And even if they had to sell it off, there would be a day that every 10 years would be this year of redemption when everything would go back to that person. And then there would be a year of Jubilee where everything would be reset. But there was also things in place that if a kinsman, somebody related to that person, could buy that person out, that it was their responsibility to do that, especially for a widow or orphans. And so we see that now played out in the book of Ruth. So if you don't understand what's happening sometimes in the Old Testament, we have to look back and say, what's going on here? What's the history? And so that is what happened. When Naomi came back with Ruth, the land that her husband had sold off during the famine, they couldn't survive. And so they moved to Moab. When they came back, Naomi had nothing. That land was now not hers. It belonged to someone else who her husband had sold it off to. But she had close relatives who were able and should have redeemed that land. Now, the way Ruth plays out, we hear about Boaz and Boaz protecting Ruth and, of course, Naomi because she is a close kinsman. And so he allowed Ruth to gather things and even told his reapers, leave stuff in the field for her because he felt it his duty, his responsibility to take care of this family member, but not exactly sure how, because God also told them during the Mosaic time, don't be partial also to poor people. They have to earn, they have to show that that they're willing to do something. And sometimes it was to sell themselves slavery, which is not type of slavery we're thinking about, but like an indentured servant that lives within the home. And kind of just to pay off debt. And then when that was done, they were released. It wasn't a forever indentured servanthood. So when it came about that Naomi came back with Ruth, there had to be somebody to help care for her and redeem that land of her husband. Well, the man that was first in line, he basically said, I can't. It would just upset everything within my home. It would ruin my inheritance. And so Boaz, the next in line, took that upon himself to take the money he had and redeem that land that had belonged to Naomi and to further bless her, because by taking that land, it was also him taking that family under his wing as well. And that meant Ruth, which also in the Mosaic covenant meant that if there was a wife left, that the person who redeemed would bring that wife into his family as well, and she would become his wife and could continue the line of children in that name, which meant all the inheritance would go to that family, not his own, because that child would now not be really his child. It would be called the child of the man who owned the land that he redeemed. And Boaz wasn't married. He was willing to give up everything that he had. And it says in the book of Ruth, he was a rather rich man. He was willing to give up everything to redeem what was lost for this family, including his inheritance, all of it. It would go to this child that he would have with Ruth. And eventually he would become part of the lineage of Christ. So as we look at this story, it is so beautiful because isn't that what the cross is about? It's about God giving up everything for us. It is about our needing to be humble, just like Ruth was. She put herself at Boaz's feet and pleaded to him to redeem the land of her mother-in-law. And she didn't know what she'd get out of it. She just knew in faith she had to ask. And God asks us to do the same thing. He asks us to come in faith, to ask him. And we don't know what the end result will be, how he will work out all that. We do know, though, the wonderful thing is that he will redeem us. And he's already paid the price. He's gone onto the cross. He's paid for our sins. And we're redeemed when we believe in him. Make sure I get to everything in my notes here. We go to the foot of the cross. There's nothing we can do but request. The act of redemption is nothing we can do. We are like Naomi coming back to, our senses and realizing that sin has cost us everything. We have nothing to give. And God says, don't worry about it. I've already paid the price. Just accept this. And that whole picture of the bride of Christ and him taking us for himself and saying, my inheritance is now your inheritance. Do you see the picture? It is just so beautiful. Anyways, the book of Ruth is more than just a story about a woman leaving her tribe to go join her mother-in-law and then to be included in the lineage of Jesus. It is God's story of redemption that is told over and over again through the Old Testament to prepare us for what he was going to do on the cross, to redeem his people and all people forever. And that was the mystery. That was the ultimate promise that he was preparing the world for through all of these stories over and over again. Isn't that amazing? So anyways, thanks for joining me on Daily Revelations, everybody, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye.